Hey everyone, AMR back again with another video. So in today's episode, I'm going to be doing the top 5 tight ends that I think could make or break your entire fantasy draft in the upcoming season. As always, if you like the content, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. I am doing a giveaway on the channel, so be sure to check that out. But I'm basically going to be doing this from 5 to 1, where 5 will be the least impactful and 1 being the most impactful tight end on the season. I'm going to give a honorable mention here at the end of the episode. I typically do that if you've seen the quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers versions of this. I typically do the honorable mentions right before I start to elaborate on why I'm choosing the number 1 as the number 1. So go ahead and stick that one out. But here at number 5, we have Irv Smith Jr. So if you're unfamiliar with who this is, he was a standout tight end at Alabama. He had such a high draft stock. He was in the same draft as TJ Hawkinson and Noah Fant. There was a lot of hype around him joining the Minnesota Vikings because the Vikings are a hyper targeting offense to the tight end position. Here are the top 6 reasons, in my personal opinion, as to why I think that Irv Smith would be a strong candidate for this season. So number 1 here, he did not play last season due to injury, so he's going to have plenty of time to rest up, get the therapy he needs, and come back stronger than ever. That's kind of like the perk / drawback to getting hurt like before the season started, is that he's going to have like pretty much an entire year to rehab, get stronger, and work on what he needs to in order to like perform at the highest level. Second overall, he's entering his 4th year in the league, and typically tight ends reach full maturity right around that 4-year mark. So whenever you see a tight end get drafted, they typically take 2, 3, sometimes 4 years to fully mature and develop. This is an average here, so some tight ends are the exception to the rule, and others just never end up developing at all. Third up, we have his team loves to target the tight end. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but they are hyper targeting the tight end. We saw it last season when they didn't really even have a strong option at the tight end position with Tyler Conklin, as you can see in the point number 4. They no longer have Tyler Conklin to go ahead and take away targets from Irv Smith Jr., so it's pretty much his to lose, like his job to lose essentially. And there's not a ton of targets outside of Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, you have KJ Osborne, you have Dalvin Cook out of the backfield. But when you have a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, who is very accurate, like last season, he had his most accurate completion percentage in his entire career. And it just like goes to prove that he loves to target those short passes, those gimme yards, give me the first down, and keep the drive going. I think that Irv Smith is going to play extremely well into that offensive schema. At number 5 here, his team will be competitive. He's in that NFC North division. 2 of the 4 teams are rebuilding, and then you really don't know what to expect coming out of Green Bay with the Devontae Adams shift over into Vegas. So he's going to be on a team that's going to be competing for the leader of the division. I did a video a couple weeks ago where I thought that the Vikings are going to be like one of the toughest teams to beat in the entire NFL. They've made the improvements that they need to on the defensive side of the ball. They've enhanced their coaching staff, and now I think that they have all of the moving pieces set in motion to really have a run at this thing. And then rounding out his resume here, we have looking to live up to that potential, as I mentioned earlier, about him being a standout tight end at Alabama. He actually had a really good combine in 2019. He's one of those guys that can definitely fly under the radar, especially because he hasn't been talked about a ton, given that he's been injured a lot. But if he's able to go ahead and stay healthy this entire season, he could really do some big things out of Minnesota. So next up on this list, we have Kyle Pitts. If you watch football at all this past season, you heard pretty much only 2 things coming out of Atlanta that were positive. First was Cordell Patterson having his best bounce back year of his entire career. And the second one, Kyle Pitts doing things that we really haven't seen any other rookie tight end do ever. Kyle Pitts is one of those exceptions to the rule that I was mentioning about earlier about taking 4 years to develop into a fully mature tight end. If he's not fully mature yet, we're in for a real treat. He is a very smooth route runner. He used to be a wide receiver at Florida, and he since went ahead and shifted into the tight end role after joining the NFL. So looking here at his top 6 reasons. Number 1, he has no one really on the offense to take away targets from him. He's going to be on a team where he's got a young quarterback. So looking at point number 3, he's on a team with a really young quarterback. Well, young essentially in terms of not a ton of NFL experience as a starter. I know that he started out at Tennessee. Of course, I'm talking about Marcus Mariota. Then he served primarily as a backup to Derek Carr the last couple of years, and now he's going to be the starter in the absence of Matt Ryan. You're definitely going to see a hyper targeting of the target share to the tight end position. I think the team really wants Kyle Pitts to be that wide receiver number one anyway. They definitely have kind of shifted their offensive schema to fit that narrative anyway. Looking here at number 2, they went ahead this offseason in the NFL draft and added Drake London. He is an USC crazy good wide receiver. I believe he was the first wide receiver taken off of the NFL draft board. Super good. I totally agree with the pick. I think that that is a very smart move, but I just don't necessarily think that a rookie wide receiver like Drake London, he's not going to be a Jamar Chase. So take that for what you will. He's definitely going to be a talented guy, but it's not enough to like completely take away all of the target share from the talent of Kyle Pitts. I've already talked about number 3, so I won't go ahead and beat a dead horse there. Looking at number 4, last season he finished with over 1,000 yards. The biggest problem with Kyle Pitts, honestly, last season was the fact that he failed to get into the end zone. That's definitely something that could end up happening again this season. He had Matt Ryan, former MVP, former Super Bowl runner-up, even though they should have won that game. So there's definitely some hot debate about whether or not Kyle Pitts is an elite tight end just because he wasn't able to score. It's a very small sample size in the grand scheme of things. We're talking about 1 year of extrapolation, and we just can't do that off of 1 year of sample. Like, we would never do that with a Travis Kelce because we have plenty of data to go there. So in terms of his ability to get in the end zone, we're just going to have to wait and see on that. But the fact that he got over 1,000 yards in his rookie campaign speaks volumes in the overall confidence that the team has and the talent that he provides. And the touchdowns will just follow. There's really no one else out there to take away from all those touchdowns as long as they are able to stay competitive in those games. Number 5, he was only dropping 5.5% of his pass catches. So that means that let's go ahead and define what a drop pass is. So a drop is when the ball hits the receiver in the hands or the receiver makes contact with the target and then fails to haul it in. That would be considered a drop pass. If the throw is completely errant, it goes short and bounces up, whatever, it gets intercepted, it gets knocked down by the DB, all that does not count as a drop percentage. So for him being a rookie tight end, and only dropping 5.5% of his pass completions is phenomenal. You'll see here on your next slide that some of the more veteran tight ends have higher drop percentage rates, and they're still very, very elite. And then for our last one here, he played 3/4 of the snaps last season. That is insanely high for a rookie tight end. Moreover, he was very involved in the offensive drives during those 3/4 snaps. Like, he was not just blocking as a tight end. We see a lot of these tight ends like Cameron Brate, OJ Howard, for instance. Both of those guys are very good tight end blocking. Cole Kmet, they're very good at blocking and not necessarily route running. Kyle Pitts is kind of the opposite. I think that he could develop quite a bit more as a blocker. And for that reason alone, I think that's why they're putting him out on so many routes and relying on him being able to catch the football. At number 3 here, we have George Kittle. So it should come to no surprise that George Kittle is probably still one of the most elite tight ends in the NFL. There's a lot of questions about whether or not he can maintain his health throughout his entire NFL career. He struggled with it, particularly these last 2 seasons. I think that this most recent season injury was kind of a looming injury into what happened this season prior to that. So if George Kittle is able to stay healthy, you could see this guy take a massive leap here in this upcoming season. Let's go ahead and jump over to the right-hand side here and talk about some of these bullet points. So for that first one, I think that Trey Lance is going to win that job at the quarterback position. Jimmy G is probably on his way out. I don't even think that the team is going to keep him. I think they might just go ahead and cut him. So whenever you have a rookie or second-year quarterback in the league, they are going to hyper-target the tight end position. They're looking for security underneath. So they want to get those quick passes to the tight end, get those positive net gains, and then just keep the ball moving. The last thing that a rookie quarterback wants to do is to go back into a 3-step drop back and just launch a 30, 40-yard bomb. Of course, they would love to do that, but most often they just don't have those reads yet. They will most likely result in an interception or just a really bad decision. So they go ahead and they hyper target the tight end in those first year to 2 years. Number 2 here, George Kittle, I talked about a little bit earlier, but he did have an injury concern in these last couple of seasons. He missed 3 games last season, but he was still almost able to achieve 1,000 yards. I think that says volumes for the overall talent and confidence that the team has in him. This team is just not the same team without him on the field. That's obvious. I think that he does a lot to the offense on keeping the ball moving. Let's go ahead and talk about that, number 6 bullet point here. They have Deebo Samuel. There's a whole lot of speculation this offseason about, is Deebo Samuel going to be returning to the team? Is he going to be seeking a trade? He's in a contract dispute. When Deebo Samuel was playing the hybrid role, he was massive for this team. I think that as long as Deebo Samuel is able to continue that hybrid role, we could see George Kittle take an even bigger step in his NFL career, which is saying a lot for a guy who is a top 3 tight end in the NFL, no questions asked. So for number 3, he's only dropped 2.1% of pass attempts. So that's pretty insane to think about. Like if he were to, so in terms of like what that sounds like, if you were to have the ball thrown to George Kittle and it hit his hands 100 times, he would catch 98 of them. That is insane to me. That is such a high catch percentage. And not only that, but he played 92% of snaps last season. He was pretty much always on the field when he was healthy, whether he is, putting blocks for the running game, which Elijah Mitchell was very impactful for the team. Deebo Samuel being that hybrid role. I think that George Kittle has a lot to offer, both from a blocking perspective as well as a pass catching perspective. Number 4, health is always a concern with George Kittle. It seems like when he does have an injury, it's a rather big one. He very rarely ends up missing a couple of games, last year being the exception. But in the year prior to that, I believe that he missed probably 2/3 of the entire season. The year prior to that, I think that he may have missed 1 game, but he was very healthy. So it's going to be curious. I'm very curious to see how George Kittle is able to maintain his health here in this upcoming season. But if he's able to stay healthy, you could see his best year yet. Number 5, tight ends are security blankets for young offense. I've said it before and I'll say it again. San Francisco loves to target the tight ends, so their offensive scheme is definitely fitting into this. And Trey Lance being such a young quarterback, he's going to need that security blanket on those 3rd downs to go ahead and just pass to a very, very sure-handed tight end like George Kittle. So at number 2, this is probably going to surprise a bunch of people. But I actually have Travis Kelce. So as you can see up there in the top right, he has a ton of accolades. Honestly, he probably should have 2 Super Bowls. I don't think that there was any controversial calls or anything like that. No, I don't. I just think that Kansas City was the better team, and they just ended up not performing. But let's go ahead and talk down this list here. At number 1, he's on a team that is extremely competitive. They have a lot of things going for them, and they're also in a division where a lot of these scores are going to be 30+ to 30+. Barn burner. Whoever wins that AFC West division, I honestly think will be representing the AFC in the Super Bowl, no questions asked. And Travis Kelce is going to be a big contributor as to whether or not Kansas City, competes or just crumbles under the pressure. Number 2, Tyreek Hill is no longer there. I mean, what else do I really need to say there when really the primary targets in Kansas City was Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce? Half of that target pool is gone now, especially with the addition of Pringle also being gone. The receivers in Kansas City right now are Juju Smith-Schuster, Travis Kelce, because he is a pass catcher, whether you like it or not, MVS, and Mecole Hardman. So of those options, I think Travis Kelce is probably your most sure-handed route runner, and he is crazy good yards after catch. Looking here at number 3, he has 1,000 yards every season since 2016. I don't really think that I need to go too elaborate on the reasoning as to why I went ahead and chose Travis Kelce as number 2, but it just goes without saying, every single year he goes out there and produces. Last season he had 1,100 yards and he had 9 touchdowns. 9 touchdowns from the tight end position is above and beyond. That could definitely take your team from being an 8-8 team in fantasy all the way up to a 11-1 or whatever. I know those numbers are very different. One was 13 and one was 16, but you get what I'm saying. He could definitely take you on a week by week basis and just win you the week right out, and that's crazy. There's really only 3 tight ends that have the ability to do this week in and week out, and Travis Kelce is definitely one of those guys. Played 82% of downs last season, which is phenomenal as a tight end, and he's extremely sure-handed, reliable end zone target. He's a big-bodied guy. He doesn't really get the credit where he deserves, but his specs are not so drastically different than a Rob Gronkowski. I think that he's a little bit more fluid in his motion. He has a lot more finesse. I think his route running is a little bit crispier, and he doesn't look as stiff, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But that's why I'm going ahead and putting Travis Kelce as number 2. And as you might be able to guess, number 1 is going to be your Mark Andrews. Sorry for the low quality picture there, but that was probably the best one that I could find that didn't have any trouble with the removal of the background. But Mark Andrews is number 1. I think that Mark Andrews is going to be your tight end 1 on the season, especially after what he showed us last season. He is a machine at the position. So similar story as to the Travis Kelce at number 2. Their main target is no longer on the team. Of course, I'm talking about Marquise Brown, or as we all know him as Hollywood Brown. He's no longer the team. He's over in Arizona. He was one of those players that got traded at the NFL draft. So Mark Andrews, look at bullet point number 3. He had 1,361 yards last season. That's with competition as the other receivers in the room. So he is a hyper-targeted tight end. You have him coming off his best season ever, so his confidence level, the team's confidence, the quarterback chemistry, all at all-time highs right now. At that number 4 bullet point, he's going to be the main target on the team. He has a very, very young locker room. He has Rashad Bateman, he's got Duvernay, and then you have a bunch of running backs who really are primarily just running backs. You don't have too many pass-catching running backs back there. I haven't seen what J.K. Dobbins can do out of the backfield from a pass-catching perspective. And if I have, it's just been a while since he got hurt before the season last season. Gus Edwards, very similar story. I think Gus Edwards is very good, but I think he's more of a power back. And then you also have the elder wand of Mike Davis, an offseason acquisition. We'll be interested to see if he makes the final roster. So you have a team that is really going to be looking to, if they're not going to be running the ball down the opposition's throat, they're going to be looking to get those quick hitter passes to keep the chains moving. At number 5, Lamar Jackson loves throwing those short passes. Like I just said it right now, but Lamar Jackson is more known for what he can do on his feet, or what he can do on the ground rather. He is one of the most elusive quarterbacks in the entire NFL. And it's very fun to watch, but he has definitely a different style to the position than what we're used to. He doesn't like sit in the pocket and then just analyze a defense and then throw the sure-handed open target. He will definitely default to whether or not he can get those 10 yards on his own, or if he can do a quick little short pass to Mark Andrews. And I think that we're going to see that quite a bit. He's on a team that's going to win, and they're going to win a lot. I think that they have a steady chance here at being able to contend in their division. I don't know if they have what it takes to get over the Cincinnati Bengals. They're going to be extremely strong here in the year following their Super Bowl appearance. But if anyone's able to do it, I think that it's going to be the Baltimore Ravens this year. I'm really excited to see what he can do. And Mark Andrews is your number 1. So before I go ahead and talk about number 1, I want to go ahead and do some honorable mentions here at the position. So a couple of honorable mentions are going to be number 1, Pat Freiermuth. I think that the offense in Pittsburgh is really not that great right now. You have a huge quarterback dispute between Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky, and both of those quarterbacks are going to be looking to hyper target a sure-handed route runner, and that's Pat Freiermuth. He's a second-year guy out of, I believe it's Notre Dame or Penn State. Maybe it's Penn State. Yeah, it's got to be Penn State. I don't know why I said Notre Dame, both of which are just like tight end machine schools. But I think that Pat Fryermuth is on a team that loves to use the tight end. They're known with like Heath Miller. I don't know the other guy's name. You had Eric Ebron there for a while. You had Vance McDonald. You just have a bunch of guys coming out of Pittsburgh who have a career making what they do at the tight end position. So I think that Pat Fryermuth is going to be really no exception. He played very, very well in year one, way better than I think anyone anticipated. And since he has really no other competitors outside of Deontay Johnson, he could really see himself having a just as good year this year. At number 2, I think that we have to go ahead and give credit where credit's due. I don't necessarily believe in the fact that he's going to live up to the hype, but Darren Waller kind of disappeared towards the end of the year due to injury. But when he's healthy, he is one of the best tight ends out in the NFL. I think there's no questions asked there. My only concern there is that he's going to be on a team that is filled with talent right now, and they just got a little stronger with adding Devontae Adams. I can't necessarily buy in 100% on Darren Waller being that, that ghost of Christmas past, if you will. Like, he was very, very good 2 years ago, even a year ago, not last season, but the year prior. And I just don't know if we're going to be able to see that in this upcoming season. You have Mike Gesicki down in the Dolphins franchise. So I think Mike Gesicki is a very, very good late pick up at the tight end position. I think that he will produce. I think that he'll probably end up being a top 10, top 8 tight end. I'm just a little nervous given the shuffling around that's going on in Miami. I don't know what's going to happen there. I think that he is a talented enough player to really make the difference on his own. And then last off on this list, I think I have to go ahead and include Dawson Knox. Dawson Knox has done some pretty crazy good things out of Buffalo. He was a standout at Ole Miss. I think that outside of his injury last season, he was on pace to be one of like the top 4 tight ends on the year if you go ahead and extrapolate those numbers. But yeah, those are going to be my honorable mentions and my list as a whole. So looking here at my list, you have Irv Smith rounding out number 5, number 4, Kyle Pitts, number 3, George Kittle, number 2, Travis Kelce, and leading the way will be Mark Andrews. As always, if you like today's content, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, helps me out a ton. But I'll catch you in the next one. See you.